The day they taped that bright orange notice to my front door, I realized I wasn't living in a neighborhood anymore. I was living under surveillance. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of morning I used to love. The sky was the color of clean linen, and the smell of fresh coffee filled my kitchen as I leaned against the counter, staring out at the half-built outdoor kitchen I'd dreamed about for years. Stainless steel countertops gleamed in the sunlight. The new grill was still wrapped in its box. I'd saved every spare dollar, skipping vacations and late-night dinners out, just to make that space. A place where my daughter Emma and I could share meals, where friends could laugh without pretense. It wasn't just a kitchen, it was a symbol of peace after years of scraping by. When I opened the front door that morning, the sound of the paper tearing off the frame cut through the calm like a blade. My eyes locked on the bright orange color. Bold, ugly, official. Notice of violation, printed in large black letters. My name below it, Jessica Miller, typed in cold precision, followed by words that made my stomach drop. Unauthorized exterior construction, immediate compliance required. For a moment, I thought there had been a mistake. Surely this was meant for someone else. My outdoor kitchen wasn't even finished. I hadn't broken any law. The builder had followed every city permit requirement. But the more I read, the heavier the words became. It wasn't the city that had issued it. It was the Homeowners Association, signed in perfect blue ink by Richard Cole, the HOA president. I'd seen Richard before, walking his dog along the sidewalk like he was inspecting every blade of grass in the community. He was in his late 50s, always wearing a tucked-in polo and mirrored sunglasses that hid whatever humanity might have been in his eyes. His house looked like it had been pulled out of a real estate brochure. Immaculate lawn, trimmed hedges, a flag that hung perfectly centered on its pole. To him, perfection wasn't just a goal. It was control. And now that control had found its way to my doorstep. I felt my hands shaking as I clutched the paper. The morning breeze carried the faint scent of cut grass and something burning. My coffee, forgotten on the stove. I turned it off, but the bitterness of the smell clung to the air, just like the bitterness rising in my chest. Unauthorized exterior construction. That phrase looped in my mind, each repetition cutting deeper. I'd spent years dreaming of that kitchen, working double shifts, missing birthdays, saving penny by penny. I'd imagined Sunday dinners, neighbors dropping by, laughter echoing under string lights. Now it felt like someone had just taped a threat over my happiness. I stepped outside, barefoot on the warm concrete. The neighborhood looked the same. Peaceful, perfect, quiet. But suddenly it felt like the walls had eyes. Across the street, curtains shifted. Someone was watching, and then, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment, Richard appeared. He was standing on the sidewalk, hands behind his back, dog leash looped neatly around his wrist. He smiled, a thin, smug line that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Mrs. Miller," he called out, his tone syrupy sweet. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Is this from you?" I held up the paper, the HOA letter shaking slightly in my hand. He nodded. "Rules are rules. That structure violates community guidelines. No unapproved modifications." My jaw tightened. "It's a kitchen, Richard. I got every permit the county required." He shrugged, still smiling. "County rules don't override our rules. You should have submitted a request to the board." "The board?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "You mean you?" His grin widened. "You'll want to take it down, Jessica. Before we have to take further action." I wanted to scream, to tear that self-satisfied smirk off his face, but instead I just stood there, the paper fluttering between us like a flag of surrender. Richard turned and walked away, his dog's collar jingling faintly as he disappeared down the street. The rest of that day passed in a blur. I sat on my back steps, staring at the half-finished counter where my dream kitchen waited. Every tile, every screw felt like a personal offense to them now. Emma came outside, her small voice breaking through the haze. "Mom, are they gonna make you take it down?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart." But that night, as I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about a kitchen. It was about control, about a man who believed his authority extended into my backyard, my life, my choices. The next morning, when I opened the door to get the newspaper, my heart stopped. There it was again. Another notice. This one nailed directly into my fence post. The orange paper flapping in the wind like a warning flag. And below it, the same signature in blue ink. Richard Cole, HOA President. The next few days felt like living under a microscope. Every step outside carried that prickle of unseen eyes. Blinds twitching, whispers dying mid-sentence. I told myself it was paranoia. But paranoia doesn't leave envelopes in your mailbox every morning. The first fine came Tuesday, $250 for non-compliance. Sterile words. But the paper felt heavier than it should have. Signed, of course, by Richard Cole. Within days, 3 more arrived. Visual obstruction, unsanctioned materials, failure to remove prohibited structure. By Friday, the total equaled nearly a month's mortgage. I called the HOA office, desperate for reason. The woman's voice was soft but robotic. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller, but once a violation is issued, the fines are automatic unless the board votes to rescind them." "Then let me speak to the board." A pause. "Mr. Cole handles communications for the board." Of course he did. That weekend, I caught 2 board members, women I'd waved to for years, standing at the edge of my property with clipboards, snapping pictures of my fence and garden. "Is this really necessary?" I called. Carol, the treasurer, shifted. "Just procedure, Jessica. Nothing personal." "Nothing personal? You're photographing my backyard." "Rules are rules," she muttered. "You know how Richard is about consistency." Consistency, his favorite word for control. Then the harassment reached my daughter. Emma came home from school, eyes glassy. "Mom, someone said we're getting kicked out because you broke the rules." "Who told them that?" "Liam's mom. She's on the board." My stomach sank. I hadn't picked this fight. I'd just built a small outdoor kitchen to make the house feel alive again. Now it was a war zone. That night, surrounded by violation letters scattered like playing cards, I began researching. That's when I found it. Every HOA must provide due notice before enforcing fines. I printed the statute, underlined it, and marched to Richard's door. He opened it before I could knock twice, smirk ready. "You fine me without due notice," I said, holding out the papers. "That's illegal." He leaned against the frame. "You can appeal to the board, but I wouldn't waste your time." "Are you threatening me?" "Just saving you the trouble," he said, closing the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every passing car sounded like a warning. I sat by the window, staring at my outdoor kitchen wrapped in plastic, a ghost of something I'd built with hope. The next morning, another envelope waited in my mailbox. Thicker, heavier, final. Final warning, property line pending. The following Saturday was supposed to be normal. For the first time in weeks, I tried to forget about the notices, the fines, and the constant eyes peeking through curtains. Emma had begged me to have a small barbecue. Just us, my sister, and her kids. I thought maybe, just maybe, laughter and the smell of food on the grill could drown out the weight pressing on our home. The day was warm, sunlight spilling through the oaks, and the sound of children's laughter brought a small flicker of peace. The half-finished outdoor kitchen stood proudly at the center of it all. Its stone counter smooth, the grill finally unwrapped, ready for something good. For a few hours, life felt normal again. I flipped burgers, wiped sauce from Emma's chin, and tried to believe this fight could be forgotten. But peace never lasts long when power is hungry. The sound of a car door slamming shattered the moment. Heads turned. I froze, spatula still in my hand, as Richard Cole's black SUV rolled to a stop right in front of my house. He stepped out, slowly, adjusting his sunglasses, clipboard in hand. Behind him, 2 other board members followed like shadows. The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Richard didn't knock. He didn't call. He just walked through the gate, uninvited, his polished shoes crunching across my patio. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller," he said, smiling as if he were greeting an old friend. "We're conducting a surprise compliance inspection." I blinked. "You can't just walk in here," I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. "Oh, I can," he replied smoothly. "Section 5A of our bylaws grants the HOA right of access for inspections of potential violations." He paused, scanning the grill like it offended him. "And this seems to be quite the violation." Every eye at the barbecue was on me now. My sister whispered, "Jess, do something." But I couldn't move. Richard circled the counter like a vulture. "You've ignored multiple notices," he continued loudly, making sure the neighbors could hear. "Refused to comply with community standards. You leave us no choice but to enforce corrective action." "Richard, please," I said, lowering my voice. "My daughter's here. This is a family event." He ignored me, waving his clipboard. "This structure must be dismantled immediately. If you refuse, the HOA will arrange removal and bill you for all costs incurred." Emma's plate slipped from her hands and crashed onto the ground, sauce splattering across her shoes. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at me. "Mom, are we in trouble?" she whispered. That was the moment the shame hit. Hard and hot. Every muscle in my body went rigid. I could feel every neighbor's stare digging into my skin. The smell of burned meat clung to the air as the grill hissed quietly between us. I wanted to scream, to throw the clipboard into his face, but my voice wouldn't come. Richard turned to leave, satisfied with his performance. "I'll give you 48 hours to remove it," he said, pulling off his sunglasses. "After that, the HOA will take further action. Have a lovely day." He walked back to his SUV, his little entourage trailing behind him. Conversations resumed in cautious whispers. My sister's husband muttered something about calling the police, but I already knew how that would go. HOAs operated in gray areas, places where law and intimidation blurred into one. That night, I researched everything I could about HOA inspections. I discovered something buried deep in the legal code, something Richard conveniently left out of his smug little lecture. HOAs must obtain homeowner consent before entering private property for inspection. What Richard had done wasn't just invasive, it was illegal. But that knowledge didn't erase the humiliation. It didn't stop the replay of Emma's face in my mind, her tears, the way her voice trembled with fear. My husband, Mark, called later that night from out of town. He'd been working double shifts to make ends meet. "Jess, just take it down," he said quietly. "It's not worth all this." For the first time, I didn't argue. I just listened to the silence after he hung up, the kind that eats away at you. When the house finally went dark, I stepped outside. The air was thick with the scent of charcoal and grass. My backyard was quiet now, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I stood before the half-finished kitchen, my fingers brushing the cool stone countertop. My humiliation was gone. In its place burned something sharper. "You want control?" I whispered into the stillness. "Let's see how you handle chaos." For days after Richard's inspection, the silence in my house felt louder than his voice ever had. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like judgment, every flicker of the porch light like a warning. The barbecue debris was gone, but the humiliation lingered in every inch of my backyard. The once promising outdoor kitchen now stood half dismantled, a reminder of defeat I could see from my kitchen window. I'd stopped opening my blinds during the day. It felt safer not to. But one night, long after Emma had gone to bed, I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, desperate for distraction, something to quiet the anger looping through my mind. That's when I stumbled across a video that would change everything. It was titled, "The Underground Chef Revolution." The thumbnail showed a backyard strung with lights, guests laughing around mismatched tables, the kind of warmth you could feel through the screen. The video followed a woman who had turned her small patio into a secret pop-up dining space. She cooked, hosted, and thrived. No restaurant license, no corporate kitchen, just a passion she refused to let die. My thumb hovered over the screen. I watched the entire video twice. By the third time, I wasn't just watching, I was studying. How she built everything temporary, how nothing was nailed down, how her setup folded away at the end of each night. And that's when it hit me. If they wanted to control what was permanent, then I'd make something that couldn't be pinned down. A surge of adrenaline ran through me. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was survival through creativity. The HOA could regulate structures, not passion. They could fine me for walls, but not for dreams that moved with the wind. I pulled out an old notebook and started sketching. My pen scratched furiously against the page as ideas poured out. Collapsible countertops, modular grills, detachable canopies. Every line felt like a step away from fear and toward freedom. I checked the time. 2:17 a.m. My eyes burned, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I wasn't scared. I was alive. The next morning, as I stood outside sipping cold coffee, I noticed someone watching me, but not in the way the others did. It was Tom Anderson, my neighbor from 3 doors down. He'd always been quiet, the type who mowed his lawn before sunrise and waved politely from afar. But now he was walking toward me, hands in his pockets, cautious but curious. "Rough few weeks," he said softly, stopping at the edge of my fence. I nodded, unsure if this was sympathy or gossip in disguise. "I saw what Richard did," he added. "Guy's got a stick so far up his back. I'm surprised he can stand straight." The laugh that escaped me was small but real. "You're not wrong," I said. He looked past me toward the kitchen's remains. "You giving up?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not a chance. Just rethinking." "The rules." Tom's eyebrows lifted. "Rethinking, huh? That sounds dangerous." "Only if I get caught." We talked for nearly an hour. Tom turned out to be a retired carpenter, meticulous, sharp, and quietly defiant. When I told him about my idea, his eyes lit up with that same spark I'd felt watching the video. "If everything's movable," he said, "they can't call it a structure. That's the loophole." He was right. Most HOAs can't restrict temporary or movable installations. Their jurisdiction covers fixed, permanent additions. What I was planning would live in the gray space, the one Richard never expected me to understand. That night, Tom came by with his old tool set and a small work light. Together, we measured, cut, and planned under the cover of darkness. Every hammer tap sounded like rebellion. Every nail a declaration that I wouldn't be bullied into silence. The stars above us flickered faintly through the thin veil of suburban streetlights. For once, I didn't feel trapped. I felt cunning. As we worked, Tom looked up and said quietly, "You know he's not going to like this." "I'm counting on it," I replied. By midnight, we had the foundation of something new. Sleek, collapsible, and almost invisible when folded. My hands were blistered, my shirt streaked with dust, but my heart was light. I could already imagine the smell of grilled herbs and garlic wafting through the night air, the sound of laughter where fear used to live. When Tom left, I stayed behind, sketching the finishing touches by the dim glow of my phone's flashlight. The night was still and silent. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. I leaned against the counter, listening to the hum of distant traffic. For a fleeting moment, I believed I might actually pull this off. Then, out of nowhere, a harsh beam of light swept across the backyard. My body froze. It wasn't the moon. It was the sharp white glare of a flashlight, moving slowly across the fence line. I ducked behind the half-built counter, heart pounding in my throat. Through the gaps, I saw the familiar outline of Richard Cole's car crawling past my house, his spotlight slicing through the dark like a searchlight. I pressed my hand against the countertop to steady my breathing. The air was cold, electric with fear and defiance. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "Go ahead, Richard. Watch all you want. You're not stopping me this time." The night of the first dinner felt unreal, like walking a tightrope between freedom and disaster. Every flicker of the lanterns felt like a heartbeat, every sound magnified by what I was about to do. I called it the open flame, a quiet rebellion disguised as hospitality. It took a week to prepare. Tom helped build collapsible counters and panels that vanished by day. At night, my yard transformed, lights strung, tables unfolded, a secret restaurant beneath the stars. Only 12 guests, strangers, who found the event through an underground dining site. They didn't know my name, just the address and the instruction. Follow the scent of smoke. By dusk, the air was rich with marinated chicken, grilled peaches, and buttered crostini. The smell wrapped around me like courage. For the first time in months, I felt power. Not dominance, but creation. Guests slipped in through the hedge gate, whispering at first, tension laced with excitement. "Welcome to the open flame," I said. "Tonight's menu is about warmth, rebellion, and a little smoke." Laughter followed. The fear began to fade. For a few hours, the world outside my fence didn't exist. Emma watched from her window upstairs, her smile glowing faintly in the dark. It steadied me. The sizzle of the grill, the soft jazz, the tang of lemon butter scallops. It all tasted like freedom. Tom leaned in mid-service. "You did it, Jess." I smiled. "It's not over yet." Because one sound, one flicker of Richard's suspicion, and the illusion would collapse. I kept glancing toward the fence, half expecting a shadow. Around 9:30, a guest asked if I'd ever open a real restaurant. "Maybe one day," I said, "when the world stops telling me what I can't build." They toasted to that, unaware they were celebrating in the middle of an HOA violation. As the night wound down, laughter softened into music and light. I wiped my hands on a towel, daring to believe it might last. Then came the sweep of a white light across the fence. Headlights. My heart froze. Richard's car crawled past, a cigarette ember glowing from his window. He paused in front of my gate. The world went silent. My pulse roared. Then he drove on, disappearing into the dark. The laughter resumed, but the air felt heavier. I knew that night had drawn a line, and soon Richard would learn exactly what side I was on. For 2 days after the first dinner, I lived in a haze of relief and adrenaline. The guests had left smiling, whispering promises to keep the secret. I told myself that was enough. One night, one victory, one breath of freedom. But the thing about secrets is that they have a heartbeat of their own, and mine was about to start pulsing far louder than I ever intended. It began with a ping on my phone early Wednesday morning. I was in the kitchen making Emma's lunch when I saw the notification, "You've been tagged in a post." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The post was from a local food blogger, someone I'd never met, but whose articles I'd seen shared countless times. Her headline read, "The secret backyard bistro everyone's talking about. The open flame delivers the best hidden dining experience in town." Beneath it were 5 glossy photos, all taken from my yard. The flicker of my lanterns, the gleam of my grill, even my hand, mid-motion, sprinkling herbs over a sizzling pan. She hadn't used my name, but the article described everything in eerie detail. The aromas, the laughter, the mystery chef who turned rebellion into art. The post had already been shared over 300 times. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding in my ears. For a second, I couldn't tell if I wanted to laugh or vomit. The words "viral sensation" glared back at me like a siren. By noon, my inbox was full. Messages poured in from strangers, people asking for reservations, journalists seeking interviews, even a local catering company offering collaboration. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Each vibration was a mix of validation and terror. Emma peeked over my shoulder, reading the article. "Mom, this is amazing. You're famous." I smiled weakly, but inside my stomach knotted tighter. "Yeah," I said softly, "and that's the problem. Because I knew someone else was reading that post too. Someone who would recognize the grill, the lighting, the address pattern blurred just enough to invite curiosity, but not safety. Richard Cole. By late afternoon, the signs of his suspicion started showing. His car crawled up and down the street twice that day. He stopped by Tom's house, talking animatedly, while pointing toward my fence. A few neighbors later told me he'd been asking questions. Questions like, "Have you noticed any strange activity behind the Miller's property? And anyone new throwing parties lately?" Tom texted me that night. "He's on to something. You need to be careful." I tried to focus on calming myself, reminding my pounding heart of what I'd learned during my research. A private gathering, even one that accepts voluntary donations or cost per guest, doesn't qualify as a commercial business under most state zoning laws. Unless I was operating as a registered restaurant or advertising publicly, I wasn't breaking any legal code. The HOA could threaten, but they couldn't regulate social dinners. Still, legality and safety don't feel the same at 2 a.m. That night, as the wind brushed through the trees outside, I jumped at every sound. Every knock, even the faint creak of my fence, felt like exposure waiting to happen. I'd installed blackout curtains in the kitchen, but I kept imagining Richard's flashlight cutting through the slats. He wasn't the kind of man to let humiliation go quietly, and I'd embarrassed him once already. The next few days blurred together. The blog post exploded, trending locally, then regionally. People speculated about the open flame like it was some underground legend. One commenter wrote, "My cousin said it's in the Maplewood HOA, somewhere near the east entrance." Another claimed to have seen lights near the Cole property. My chest tightened every time I refreshed the page. Emma, on the other hand, was ecstatic. "You should invite more people," she said one morning over breakfast. "You could actually make money from this." I forced a laugh. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But inside, her words lingered. Maybe there was a future in this, if I could stay one step ahead of Richard. On Friday evening, just as I was cleaning up after dinner, a notification chimed again. It was an email with the subject line, "Reservation request. Party of 6. I hesitated before opening it. The message was polite, short, and oddly formal. "Hello. I've heard wonderful things about the open flame. I'd like to reserve a table for 6 this Saturday evening. We're very eager to experience what everyone's been talking about. RC." My throat went dry. I read the initials again, certain my eyes were lying. RC. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing, the room suddenly too quiet. Could it be someone else? Maybe another person with the same initials? But deep down, I already knew. The careful tone, the timing, the confidence. It all matched him perfectly. Richard Cole wasn't asking for a reservation. He was setting a trap. The air in the kitchen felt heavier with every passing second. Outside, the wind brushed against the blinds, carrying the faint rustle of the flag that hung in front of his house. He was planning to walk straight into my secret world. Not to dine, but to expose. And the worst part? I was going to let him. The night Richard Cole made a reservation at the open flame felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Terror and exhilaration in equal measure. I spent the day moving through my kitchen like a ghost, every motion deliberate, hands trembling despite the calm. The counters gleamed, the grill smoked, and lanterns flickered softly. Tom wanted to cancel. "Jess, this is too dangerous," he said, unloading crates. "If he figures it out, he'll bury you in fines." I looked at the tables draped in white, the scent of herbs thick in the air. "He already has," I said. "Tonight, I dig my way out." By 7:30, guests arrived. 5 strangers and one face I knew too well. Richard Cole. Pressed shirt, perfect posture, smugness polished to a shine. But tonight, he wasn't an enforcer. He was a man who thought he ruled the room. I stayed behind the counter, voice hidden by music and laughter. Tom played host while I worked behind the smoke. From my station, I heard Richard holding court. Most people don't understand what it takes to maintain order. Everyone wants freedom until their neighbor builds something ugly. A woman chuckled. "You sound like a judge." He grinned. "Close. I'm the HOA president." I forced myself to focus on the plates. Honey lime salmon, roasted vegetables glistening with truffle oil. Each dish was defiance served hot. His praise carried easily over the clinking of forks. "This is exceptional," he said. Whoever cooked this has real skill. The irony tasted sweet. The man who fined me for cooking now paid to eat the very thing he outlawed. My fear melted into quiet control. Tom whispered as he passed, "He's loving it, Jess." I smiled. Let him taste hypocrisy. Later, Richard bragged about cracking down on violators. One woman thought she could build a kitchen in her yard. He laughed. She'll learn. My grip tightened on the tongs, but my anger turned to resolve. I remembered something from HOA law. Selective enforcement. Apply rules unfairly, and you break them yourself. Richard had done it for years, and now he was giving me proof. One boast at a time. Dessert went out. Molten chocolate cake. Richard savored a bite, then said, "You should tell the chef they're wasting their talent. I'd love to meet them." The laughter stilled. He rose from his chair, scanning the yard. "Where's the chef?" The music faltered. His footsteps crunched closer. My pulse thundered as the smoke curled upward. I drew a breath, eyes steady on the grill. "Welcome to dinner, Richard." Richard's shoes crunched against the gravel as he moved closer, his shadow stretching long and dark under the hanging lights. I could feel his gaze narrowing through the haze of smoke that drifted up from the grill. My palms were slick with sweat. Tom tried to intercept him, stepping forward with a nervous laugh. "Sir, I'm afraid the chef prefers to remain anonymous," he said, his voice steady but strained. Richard didn't slow down. "Nonsense," he replied, his tone dripping with authority. "I just want to thank them personally." He took one more step, and then he saw me. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. His confident smirk faltered as recognition hit. His jaw slackened, eyes narrowing as if trying to make sense of the impossible. "You," he muttered, his voice low but sharp. "Jessica Miller?" Every muscle in my body tensed, but I didn't move. I simply looked him in the eye, the heat from the grill flickering between us like a silent line of fire. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "You're running a business out of your property? This is a clear violation." A few nearby guests turned their heads, their conversations dissolving into uneasy silence. One of them lifted a phone subtly, the lens catching the glow of the string lights. "This isn't a business," I said evenly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through me. "It's a private dinner, with guests who volunteered to contribute toward ingredients. Perfectly legal according to both state law and HOA policy." Richard's face flushed red. "You're hiding behind technicalities. You think this little stunt makes you clever?" I stepped closer, just enough for him to hear the quiet steel in my voice. "No, Richard. It makes me free." Gasps fluttered through the crowd. The guests were fully tuned in now, phones raised discreetly, capturing the scene unfolding before them. Richard's voice cracked with rage. "You can't do this on community property. You violated every bylaw on—" I cut him off, my tone sharp and clear. "Community property? This is my backyard, Richard, my home. You fined me for building a kitchen, but you just paid to eat my food. So tell me, which rule did you break tonight? Yours or mine?" A few guests chuckled under their breath. Someone murmured, "She's right." Richard's composure began to crumble. He looked around, realizing that every set of eyes, the very people he used to command with fear, were now staring at him with disgust. The man who had built his identity on control suddenly looked small beneath the soft glow of the lanterns. "Turn off those phones," he barked, waving at the guests. But no one listened. The cameras stayed up. The whispers grew. "That's the HOA guy, isn't it?" someone whispered. "He's the one from that article." Richard pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're finished, Jessica. I'll have the county, the HOA, the fire marshal, everyone. Shut this down." I smiled, not with defiance, but with calm resignation. "You've been trying to shut me down for months, Richard. The only thing you've succeeded in doing is proving that power doesn't make you right." He stared at me for a long moment, chest heaving, before storming out. The gate. The night air swallowed his footsteps, leaving behind a stunned quiet. Then, one by one, the guests began to clap. It wasn't loud, just a slow building rhythm that carried a strange kind of solidarity. Someone raised a glass. "To the open flame," they said softly. "And to Jessica Miller." I wanted to feel triumphant, but beneath the applause was a tremor of dread. I knew Richard, and I knew this wasn't over. The next morning, that dread took shape. When I opened my front door, the mailbox was stuffed full. Envelopes jammed so tightly that one had split open at the corner. Each bore the same emblem in the top corner: Maplewood Estates HOA. I pulled them out one by one. Violation notices, penalty warnings, formal complaints. At the bottom of the pile lay a thick, white envelope. My name printed in bold. The heading read, "Notice of Pending Civil Action. Maplewood Estates HOA. Ers Jessica Miller." The story exploded overnight. When I woke, my phone was buzzing nonstop. News alerts, missed calls, messages from strangers. Every screen screamed the same headline: HOA sues woman over viral pop-up restaurant. Backyard chef faces legal showdown. My life had become a headline. Reporters camped at the end of my street. Cameras aimed at my house like vultures. Neighbors peeked from blinds or looked away entirely. What began as quiet defiance had turned into a public spectacle. And Richard Cole? He was basking in it. On the local news, he stood before the HOA office, calm and polished. "She's operating a commercial business in a residential area," he told reporters. "Our actions are about safety and fairness." I turned off the TV before I threw something at it. Safety and fairness. From the same man who humiliated me in front of my family. This wasn't justice. It was control, dressed up as community service. By noon, lawyers were flooding my inbox. I called only one, Linda Harper, an old friend turned property rights attorney. Tough, brilliant, and unshakable. She arrived that evening, flipping through the lawsuit with a frown. "Classic overreach," she said. "They've turned your neighborhood into a dictatorship with lawn care." "Can they do this?" I asked. "They can try," she said, meeting my eyes. "Winning is another story." Linda explained my right to quiet enjoyment, the freedom to live without harassment. Richard's barrage of fines and legal threats wasn't enforcement, it was retaliation. "They can't fine you for embarrassing them," she said. "That's not policy, that's revenge." For the first time in weeks, hope stirred. We built a defense, every notice, every email, every photo. Tom helped organize evidence. Emma recorded Richard's late-night patrols. Still, sleep was scarce. Fear and determination became my new rhythm. 2 days later, the story went national. Suddenly, I was the woman who stood up to suburban tyranny. But the louder the attention grew, the more desperate Richard became. He blasted HOA-wide emails accusing me of health code violations and gas hazards. Lies, all of them. But his empire was cracking, and he knew it. Linda warned me quietly, "He's not done, Jess. Men like him never retreat. They retaliate." She was right. The next morning, a bright red notice clung to my door. Immediate safety violation. Property under review. Richard's signature marked the bottom. Beneath it, new words. Eviction pending investigation. My hands shook as I read. They weren't just fining me anymore. They were trying to take my home. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee, the scent of anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clenched in my lap, forcing steady breaths. Across from me, Richard Cole adjusted his tie beside his lawyer. Sleek, polished, and smug. When he caught my eye, he offered that familiar half-smile, the one that always meant he thought he'd already won. The judge entered. "This court will come to order." The words hit like a drumbeat. This wasn't just another hearing. It was months of humiliation and fear condensed into one moment. The HOA's attorney started smoothly. "Your Honor, my client seeks only to maintain safety and compliance. The defendant, Miss Miller, willfully violated community rules by operating an unlicensed business." Richard leaned forward, radiating control. Then came the photos. My backyard under lantern light, Laughter frozen into evidence. The lawyer stacked violation letters like ammunition. The HOA gave ample warning, he said. When Richard took the stand, he played the part perfectly. I take no pleasure in this, he said solemnly. But the rules apply to everyone. Without enforcement, order collapses. Order. His favorite word. His disguise for control. Then Linda rose. Her calm voice cut through the room. Your Honor, this isn't about order. It's about abuse of authority. Step by step she dismantled their case. Permits proving my kitchen met code. Email showing Richard bypassed board approval. And finally, Section 8C of the HOA bylaws projected on screen. No inspection of private property without homeowner consent or 24 hours written notice. Silence fell. Mr. Cole, Linda said, entered my client's backyard without permission and humiliated her publicly. That's not enforcement. That's harassment. Richard's jaw tightened. Linda pressed on. Tom testified about the patrols. Emma, trembling but brave, told the court how her mother cried at night, terrified of losing their home. Then came Linda's closing argument. HOAs have limited authority, and when that authority is used selectively, out of personal vendetta, it collapses under its own abuse. Her words hung like a blade in the air. When I took the stand, my voice shook, then steadied. I spoke of the sleepless nights, the endless fines, the feeling of being trapped in my own home. I wasn't trying to start a war, I said softly. I was just trying to live in peace. As I stepped down, Richard's smirk was gone, replaced by something else. Panic. The judge leaned forward. I've heard enough for today. Verdict tomorrow morning. The gavel struck once. Richard turned to me as we stood. For the first time, he didn't smile. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. Fear, disbelief, and the faint scent of defeat. Tomorrow would decide everything. The next morning, the courthouse felt heavier than before. Quieter, as if even the walls understood what was about to happen. The air was thick with tension and the faint buzz of murmured speculation. Reporters lined the hallway, cameras poised, waiting to see whether one ordinary woman could actually take down an HOA president who had ruled his neighborhood like a king. I barely slept the night before. My nerves were raw, my hands cold, but beneath the exhaustion was something steadier. Resolve. Linda walked beside me, her briefcase in hand, eyes focused ahead. Whatever happens, she whispered, you already won something, Jess. You stood up. We sat at the same tables as before. Richard was already there, posture rigid, jaw tight. He avoided looking at me, which was fine. I didn't need to see his face to know he was seething. His attorney whispered something to him, and Richard just nodded once, mechanical, like a man pretending to still be in control. The judge entered promptly at 9. Everyone rose, the sound of wooden benches scraping across the floor echoing like thunder. My pulse raced in rhythm with the sound. When we sat, the judge shuffled his papers and cleared his throat. This case, he began, has revealed a troubling misuse of authority under the guise of enforcement. His gaze flicked toward Richard briefly before landing on me. The evidence presented shows a clear pattern of selective enforcement, procedural violations, and personal vendetta. The court finds in favor of the defendant, Ms. Jessica Miller. For a moment, I couldn't move. The words hung in the air like a bell ringing underwater, distant but powerful. My mind tried to catch up. Fines in favor. I turned to Linda, and she smiled, that calm, fierce kind of smile that said I told you so. The judge continued, voice steady and deliberate. The Maplewood Estates HOA is ordered to pay compensatory damages in the amount of $75,000 for harassment and emotional distress. Furthermore, this court mandates an internal audit of the HOA's enforcement procedures. Mr. Richard Cole is hereby removed from his position as president effective immediately. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Richard's attorney stood, sputtering. Your Honor, with respect, this is... The judge cut him off. Enough, counselor. This court's decision is final. The gavel came down once, sharp and clean. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. The weight that had pressed against my chest since that first orange notice lifted. Not entirely, but enough for me to breathe again. Linda squeezed my hand, and before I could stop myself, tears blurred my vision. When we stepped outside, the cameras were waiting. Microphones pushed forward, voices calling my name. Jessica, how does it feel? What's your message to other homeowners? I didn't have a rehearsed answer. I just spoke from the heart. It feels like peace finally means something again. I said softly. No, one should feel unsafe in their own home. If you're being bullied by the people meant to protect your community, fight back. You don't need power to win, just persistence. By evening, the story had spread everywhere. Homeowner defeats HOA tyranny. Woman wins landmark case over neighborhood harassment. Messages poured in from strangers, people thanking me for standing up. Others sharing their own horror stories. For the first time, I realized it wasn't just my fight. It was everyone's. But even victory has a shadow. As the courthouse emptied, I lingered near the steps, savoring the cool air, the faint echo of relief still humming through me. That's when I heard it. The familiar click of expensive shoes on pavement. Richard Cole. He stood a few feet away, his tie loosened, face pale but eyes burning with quiet fury. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped closer, his voice low, venomous. You think this is over, Jessica? I met his gaze unflinching. It is for you. He smiled, a cold, hollow smile, before turning away and walking toward the parking lot. The sound of his car door slamming echoed like a warning. I stood there watching his taillights fade into the morning haze, my victory still fresh, my hands still trembling. And yet deep down, I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. Some battles don't end with a verdict. They just change shape. A year later, my backyard looked nothing like the battlefield it once was. The cracks were filled, the garden bloomed again, and the outdoor kitchen, once wrapped in warnings, now gleamed with official certification. A small sign near the gate read, "The Open Flame, licensed and legal." It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was freedom. Built brick by brick, earned through sleepless nights and a courtroom war. I hadn't just fought for myself, but for every homeowner told they couldn't live freely on their own land. That evening, I hosted a community dinner. No tickets, no secrecy, just gratitude. Lanterns glowed as neighbors filled the tables, laughter rising under the open sky. Some who once avoided me now brought desserts and hugs. Even the local paper showed up, calling it the story that refused to die. Emma helped serve appetizers, her grin brighter than the lights above. Tom manned the grill beside me, smirking. You've officially made rebellion look gourmet. I laughed. Maybe that's the only way to survive here. The air filled with rosemary and garlic, plates clinking, glasses chiming. For the first time there was peace. Real peace. No tension, no lawsuits. Just life. Then I saw him. Richard Cole, standing by the gate, holding a bottle of red wine like an apology. He looked older, worn by pride and defeat. Conversations paused, but I lifted a hand. It's fine. Didn't expect to see you, I said. He nodded. Didn't expect to come. But maybe it's time. Then have a seat, I said. Everyone deserves to eat. He joined quietly. We didn't talk much, but the silence between us felt different. No longer sharp, almost respectful. Watching him sip his wine, I realized I didn't hate him anymore. Anger had carried me through the fire. But peace didn't need revenge. When the plates were cleared, I spoke to the crowd. A year ago, this place was a pile of threats. Tonight, it's proof that justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes, it's peace. And peace comes when you stop waiting for permission to live. Applause rippled through the yard. Emma hugged me, whispering, "You did it, Mom." I smiled. "No, sweetheart. We did." As the guests drifted home, I blew out the lanterns, warmth still glowing in my chest. Then I saw it, taped to the mailbox. A white envelope. No name, no address, just the HOA letterhead. A cold laugh escaped me. Some things never change, I murmured. I looked toward the dark street, the wind stirring the last light. Would you have fought back, I whispered, or walked away? Somewhere in the distance a door slammed, and the next battle began.